had a lot of people, since I've been open about Jake's diagnosis, reach out to me about, should I get my child evaluated? And there's a lot of hesitancy. Early intervention, the earlier you can support your child, the better. And what I'm saying, and I want to be really clear, this is about providing accommodation so that your child can live a full life.
You shared this stat with me. I don't know if you remember off the top of your head.
I think it's like 87%.
87%.
It's in the 80s at least.
Parents with a child on the spectrum get divorced. Mm-hmm. That's a freaking high number. Welcome back to Over Dinner, episode 10. We're excited to have you back. We're going to start a 2-part series. And we really wanted to dive into something that has been challenging for us to talk about. But we wanted to talk about autism, specifically about our son, Jake. In the first episode, we really want to discuss really the signs leading up to it, pre-diagnosis, the moment we actually got the diagnosis, how that experience has played out differently for each of us, and really where we are now. The second part, which will be coming next week, we want to talk about our approach to therapies. It's a lot of controversy. ABA, there's OT, there's speech, there's in-home, there's at center. Really want to talk about our approach and what's been best for us in helping Jake grow, and hopefully answer some questions that maybe people have on that's a challenging part. So we're excited to share this with you. This is something we've been a little anxious, a little scared about talking about, but we feel it's time to really bring it out and share, because I think we can really help some people.
Mm-hmm. I think you said it really well. Just like it's uncomfortable to talk about, but not for the reasons that people may think. Like, it's not shameful. I don't feel shame. Yeah. The most important thing is protecting him.
Yeah. I think we've gone through probably all the emotions, and shame might have fit in there somewhere.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And I want to normalize that too. And I think that's something what we'll discuss tonight is it is a range of experience that you're going to go through. Just like we talk about the human experience, like, and all of these emotions are valid. And you go through them at different stages of like the pre-diagnosis, the diagnosis, the post-diagnosis, and then a couple years later, which is where we're at now. Yeah. And I'd say, although I still have some moments of feelings that may not be as positive as I'd like, I'm in a very different position than I was 2 years ago. Yeah. Over 2 years ago at this point.
Yeah, I think we both are. I think both different journeys, as we'll talk about. So why don't we start? Let's start kind of how it all started back in San Diego. You tell the story really well, mm-hmm. But Jake, was it about 16 months when we started, or
no.
Kind of walk us through it, Nick?
No, close by, but so Jake was born in the pandemic. Well, he was born the week before the pandemic.
March 3rd,
2020. And we stole hand sanitizer running out of the hospital. Thought it was a joke still. Did not really fully understand. And then a week later, everything shut down. And so we were in a bubble with the first real year of Jake's life. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have a lot of comparison. He's our first child. We don't really know. And also we weren't around a lot of babies. And if we were around babies, it was outside. We were separated. We couldn't really tell like, oh, this child's doing this. This child's doing that.
You're not really thinking that.
And you're not thinking about it. You're not thinking about it until 12 months. I went to the pediatrician for the well check visit, and she asked me if he was saying any words. And I said, he said mama once at 9 months, but hasn't said anything since. And she said, is he saying cookie?
I was like, that's crazy.
I was like, at the time, I was like, cookie, like that's a big word. And now having a neurotypical almost 2-year-old who has a very big vocabulary, it's really interesting to look back and be like, oh,
but we didn't know that.
We didn't know. So that's kind of when the first thing kicked in, was like, maybe he is maybe there's something going on, right? His brain's is a little different. But I didn't fully go into.
Was there any things you were seeing then that sparked it? What were signs for you?
Yes. Well, he was hand flapping at the time. But when I had researched it, it said that up until 3 years old, it was a typically developing thing. He wasn't always aware of when I left the room or when I entered the room.
He has a name.
And his name.
Yeah.
He wasn't respond. I can't fully remember, but he was not. I wasn't very responsive to his name. But he did have joint attention in the sense he had great eye contact. He was so affectionate and happy and joyful. And at the time, my thought process of what autism was not that.
Yeah.
Was that a person who is autistic is not going to be making eye contact, is not going to be happy, is not going to have those things, because that's what the media had portrayed it as, and I didn't have any education. So I didn't think autism. At 13 months, I felt pushed. Oh, well, I felt pushed because of this reason. We were at a birthday party right outside of our cul-de-sac, and Jake was sleeping, and it was our friend's birthday, and then he woke up, so I brought him down, and there was like this large toy car, the ones that you push kids in, and I remember the moms were trying to take pictures of the babies together, and he wasn't listening when his name was being called. He was like in his own world, and he kept crawling away.
Every other kid was crawling
on this car. They were all trying to be
looking
together, looking at their parents sitting together, and he kept crawling away. He was going like, just into the field and doing his own thing. And I when I picked him up and we walked back in the house, I said to Jarrod, I think something's different. And what happened?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in denial yet. Right. I just didn't see it. Right. Part of my background prior to getting into the job I've been with for the last 12 years is I was an ABA therapist. And I mostly worked with more extreme
higher support needs
of autism. So like when you're mentioning that or something, I was like, man, I've seen this before. Like, no,
it's not him.
And to me, it was like really too early, but it wasn't even a thought process for me.
Yeah. So for me, that was the day. Like I will always remember that day of remembering something is different. And at 14 months, we hadn't had much change in terms of language development. And I felt a lot of anxiety that I needed to do something. And so we worked with the regional center, which is in California, amazing resource. If you are listening and you live there, it's all over the entire state. And at this time, they were just coming out of virtual support. So we were able to have one-on-one sessions at our house. That was terrifying in itself. Yeah. Like, you're bringing a therapist into your house. Like, you don't really know what's going on. This is your first kid. I mean, we went through a lot, actually. Yeah. So we had OT. He qualified for OT. And he qualified for behavioral therapy because at 14 months, they do not have speech therapy, at least where we were. So he qualified for both, and he I think he had 1 or 2 sessions a week with both therapists, and it was great. It was really helpful. Yeah. We learned a lot. I was involved with all the sessions, and we learned a lot. And then Jarrod got a promotion, and we got the opportunity to move to Atlanta. So he was in therapy from 14 months to 18 months, and then we moved. And we decided as a team that we were going to put him in preschool and see if that shook things up, be around peers. This would be the first time he's around other children who are talking. And he started there in November. We moved in October, started in like mid-November. And in January, I was asked to come in for a teacher conference. Were you there for that?
Nope.
No, it was just me. Yes, you were. You were there for that.
Was there?
Remember the meeting we had in the classroom?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was great, Dad.
We were both there. She told us that she felt that she didn't know Jake was on the spectrum, but she just shared that there was some differences. He wasn't staying in circle time. He wasn't responding to his name.
Spinning around by himself.
And then one day I walked by the classroom and I saw all the children in circle time and Jake spinning around in the classroom. And it hurt. Mm-hmm. It hurt a lot. Like, it was really hard to watch that because, you're in the beginning of an unknown. All you're thinking is like, what's wrong? And you're worried about the future that you thought you had. And things are crumbling. What you thought you had is no
and
longer
the
that.
question probably comes up, why?
Why?
Why us?
Right. But but we didn't know yet. Okay.
No.
So, but I just knew something was different. And I think this also hit really hard for me, being a neurodiverse myself, being diagnosed with ADHD at 10. I struggled a lot with feeling different all throughout my childhood. So I think I was also really hypersensitive to looking at what was happening and watching it. So in the middle of the night, sometime in January, I sat up and I woke Jarrod up and I said, he is autistic. We have to get him diagnosed. We have to go this direction. So we found a really great psychologist who was able to fit us in about probably 8 weeks. It was right after his second birthday.
Yep. Yeah, so formally you can't get a diagnosis until 2 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to at least wait till your child is 2.
Mm-hmm. And we sat in we took him there, and we'll talk about that process and what that's like if you are thinking about getting a diagnosis or going to at least get evaluation. But we went in there and it was a really gentle process. She just did some games with him, and he washed a baby. We didn't even know he could do that.
I think, and we were sitting there, we're like, he's killing it.
Yeah.
Like, he's doing great.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think he's doing really well.
Yeah. I was like, he makes eye contact. He's so friendly.
He's pointing out pictures. He's doing great.
He wasn't talking.
No.
He had maybe a very, 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 very small amount of vocabulary. And what we know now, Jake was really interested in the alphabet. So he was talking about all the letters and the numbers, but that's pretty much what his vocabulary was. So she comes back in the room and sits down, and she was just like, Jake is an incredible child. He is just such a light, wonderful, and he meets the criteria for autism. And it was like, I call it relief and grief, right? It's like, okay, now we know that there is something going on.
Yeah.
And what the hell does this mean now?
Yeah.
And also just fear, right? A lot of fear. So she talked to us about what would be the next steps, and she did say the gold standard, which of ABA. We're going to get into all of that stuff next week, and how to find the right therapist, how to have those conversations, how to advocate for your children, and to make sure that you're building a team that is based on what your child's needs are. So we'll get into that next week. But within your evaluation and her actual treatment plan, she'll give you information. So Jake's actual diagnosis was autism spectrum disorder with language impairment. So what he struggled with, and still to this day may not be his strongest skill, is language, expressive and receptive, and the difference between those. Expressive is me talking to you right now, and receptive is following directions. Yep. So Jake, where are your shoes? Go get your shoes on, kind of thing. So right after that, Mama went to work.
That's a good thing. We'll back up, but knowing Nikki, I know when we got that diagnosis, I knew right after that, Nik, what she does well is just she'll take action and she'll get it done. And Nik went to work and started building and talking to places, and 30 places, finding the best support for Jake, obviously trying to learn, researching everything you needed to know.
It was very overwhelming.
Yeah, it was a lot. Yeah, I'm sure it was so much because you're navigating something you have zero clue about, and don't know what that's like. And there's tons of research, and with social media and all these things, there's so much coming at you.
Yeah.
And what's best and what to know best. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But let's talk about, I guess, for you, obviously the initial diagnosis, but then fast forward a few months, like once it started to settle in, like, what was that experience like for you?
I would say, in all honesty, I didn't find full acceptance of his autism diagnosis until really the last 6 months, maybe. I've always been in love with my child, and I've always been enamored with his ability, and I've always believed in him and trusted him, which is why I really pressed hard to get those supports in place. And I knew that I didn't want to change him. I didn't want him to feel
what
different.
What were you feeling?
I know. So I'm coming back to this. So that was running through me on one track, and the other track was deep grief. Because there's this poem that I've shared on Instagram multiple times. It's by Emily something. We will tag her. But she wrote a poem about being in Holland. And I'll just give a quick summary of it. It's about, you've waited your whole life to go to Italy. You've packed your bags. You're ready to go. You get on the plane. You're like, we're going to Italy. We're going to Italy.
So stoked.
And you land in Holland. And they're like, no, like, this is where you're going. There's no way to get to Italy now. And so you have to get off the plane and you go to Holland and you got to figure it out. And it's not Italy. But over time, you realize how incredible Holland is too.
No diss to Holland.
No diss to Holland.
It's just a metaphor.
The poem.
It's just a metaphor.
Yeah. But like, it's like that. It's like you have a baby and you have an expectation. I hate to say it like that.
What you've seen other kids and what they tell you.
Yeah. Like what you tell you is going to happen. Yeah. Like you're going to play, play catch with your son in the backyard, or the way, you grew up and different things. And so that is like the biggest grief, because it's not actually your child. It's actually the expectation that you had. It's this dream that is no longer what is actually happening.
Yeah. And you don't know what to dream anymore.
No.
You don't know what to hope for anymore. You're more worried about I have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah. And, just as you're saying that, what I was thinking about is that something that we should really open up is this idea of like, did that change because we now had a label?
Yeah.
Because like the truth of the matter is like, we have the same dreams for Sydney, but she may not do any of those things, right?
Oh, for sure.
Like I was driving today and I was thinking about, man, she's super athletic. Like she could be doing all of these incredible sports, and like I'm so excited for that. She may not be interested at all.
She might not care.
She might not be care. So I'm curious, and we can come back to where I was feeling, but I'm just curious to segue for a second. Do you think that having a label skews that, in the sense that we now don't know what to hope for, but it's not because of...
I think initially, and that's what I'm trying to refrain back to, is that we've obviously we're in a different place now than we were then. But back then you're like, it's scary. You don't know what's going to happen and what it's going to look like and what he can't do. What is, then what is the world going to think of him, and how are they going to respond to him? Can he be successful in a place that's not set up for his needs and the way his brain functions? So yeah, I think initially, I think now we're like, man, this kid can do anything, because he shocks us every single day. I mean,
Rice theory.
We'll
get into that.
We'll talk to that. But I think then it's like, you're kind of like, you're trying to live day to day.
Yeah.
And figure it out for yourself, be there for him, figure out his needs.
You know what I think is, in the beginning, I leaned a lot on other people to be the expert. And then now where I'm at, I'm the expert. And I mean it in terms of like my child's needs. Like, I'm going to listen to other people's perspective, but it's at the end of the day, like I've done my own.
But also too, I think that's a huge point, because it's called autism spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
They said you met one kid with autism, you met one kid with autism. So these experts are going to have a general theory or idea of what you need to do and what support they might need. But it's like,
and most of them are neurotypical.
Yeah. And that's something that you taught me, and you did a really great job of, is like, why am I listening to someone who's not experiencing the world
like an autistic person?
Yeah. Like an autistic person. Like, why don't we research and learn about? And there's so many awesome autistic folks on the internet who are sharing their story and what it felt like. There's books written by neurodiverse people, and they're sharing like what they wanted, what they needed, what they wanted their parents to respond to, what kind of support they needed, what they liked, what they didn't like. And yes, that might not all be Jake, but it was interesting to see their experience, where the experts are telling you they have no idea what the experience is like.
Right.
They're just saying, and what we always thought was happening is these experts are trying to make them be typical.
well,
to make them be able
some
to.
are.
Some are, and there's some that are really child led. Let's make you live your full potential and live a great life. But still, even that person, if they are not neurodiverse and know what the experience is like, it's really hard. What's your experience?
Right.
Like research? Okay, but the people researching are not neurodiverse.
Right.
So I think that took us some time to understand. Of course, the first place you're going to go is like what's out there.
Right.
Right. And then you start to learn more. And I think that's what's been great. And you've done, and you've done a lot better job than I have, but you're constantly learning and evolving. But I think to your point, we know him best. And we know what his needs are and what he's great at. And
so you asked me how I feel. So that right there alone brings up a lot of worry, fear, and increased anxiety, because I go, well, if we die, somebody else, well, who are his guardians, will not know him like us.
Yeah.
And it's a big, and to make sure that he is raised in the way that we want him to be, in this neurodiverse, affirming way, the way, just that's really hard. And so there's a lot of, it's super complex the way I feel, because I have extreme pride and then extreme worry. I don't sit in the worry camp as much as I once did. Just as you mentioned, he's continuing to just blow us out of the water. We're just so impressed with him. And when we say this, we're not saying like, oh, wow, he's catching up to neurotypical milestones. What we're seeing is Jake and him like developing him skills and his expressing himself and doing, Jake things
that he loves to do.
And so
and getting really good at the things that he loves to do.
Exactly. And we are encouraging that. And we're getting a little off track. So like, let's bring it back to how we're feeling. And I definitely want to talk about, I've had a lot of people, since I've been open about Jake's diagnosis, reach out to me about, should I get my child evaluated? And there's a lot of hesitancy. And I saw something today on Instagram by Temple Graydon, who was talking about literally early intervention. The earlier you can support your child, the better. And what I'm saying, and I want to be really clear, this is about providing accommodation so that your child can live a full life. And this is something that Jarrod and I talk about often is, what are our hopes and dreams for Jake? Is ultimately to be a thriving, independent adult in this society without us. And what are the things we need to do in order for him to feel that way? And so a lot of people avoid getting these diagnoses because they're worried about a label. They're worried they don't know what to do. It's super overwhelming. I mean,
what will other people think?
Well, other people think it's a big one. So I want to come back to that. But I want to finish what you were saying in regards to how I feel. And I definitely want to hear about your experience as well. I call them grief bubbles and I call them grief bombs. So sometimes I'll have little pricks of things that I like. For example, on Mother's Day, other 4-year-old children are filling in these like Mad Lib things about their mom. Like, my mom is 4 years old and she has yellow hair and she is a nurse. And like they fill in all these things. Our son can count by sevens, but cannot answer at this moment.
Maybe he could. He put on my letter. He'd write the game is write a letter, write a color. Well, you might be able to do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm not going to discount that.
My mom is 47.
I'm just saying.
Her favorite color is yellow.
But do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay. So there are little
more so the understanding it's Mother's Day. I'm doing something
for my mom. Right. So there's grief. There's grief bubbles that I can pop quickly, feel and pop, and then there's grief bombs that can feel like they come out of nowhere, and man, those things take me out for like a week, and I really have but what I've learned, I have a lovely group of autistic mom friends, or not, they're not autistic. I have autism mom friends, so their children are autistic. And we're able to really connect on these things like, hey, like this thing happened and it's like crushing, or I'm having a really hard time. I'm at dinner with a bunch of moms who have neurotypical children and I just can't relate. And I have that support system, and that's been really, really helpful. So most of all, I do have moments still. And then it felt much more hopeless. But with time, with therapy, with support, with learning and educating myself and undoing a lot of biases that I had, and fully coming into what it means to be a neurodiversity affirming parent, um, I'm in, I am an acceptance.
And I think what also has helped more recently is the acceptance and really acknowledgement of your own diagnosis.
Yes.
Of your ADHD, which is something you've tried, didn't really go through that experience. You pushed it away. It's bad, right? You're different. Don't be ADHD. Be typical, Nikki.
Yes.
And I think
my whole life.
Yeah, your whole life. So I think you've really worked. This is brand new and recent. And I think that's really helped as well.
Yeah. And that Jake is a gift for me in that way, is that he was the catalyst to break open that mask, to start taking the pieces off, of having to really look at how do I want him to feel in this world in reflection of what I experienced. And I did not want those internalized messages to happen to him. And in turn, I had to look at myself and to start to do that healing in order to find full acceptance of him. And I'm embracing my brain, which means I'm embracing his. So overall, it is hard. And as you always say, it's how you look at it. It's perspective. That autism is also a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure there's so much more I could say and go into it. Sometimes if you catch me on like a harder day, I'm going to say more challenging things, but things have been okay lately. So I'm going to ride that wave too. Yeah. Let's check in with you. Yeah. You know, you had a very different experience than me.
Yeah. Speaking of perspective and lens, like I was just in the very beginning, I don't think it's denial, but optimistic. And hey, we're given this gift. We're given this, and he was given the right parents for this. You know, you being neurodiverse, you being a doctor, me having experience.
I'm not a medical doctor. Just want to make sure everyone knows.
Caveat: do not take any recommendations. Nikki is not a medical doctor, but she's a doctor. And so my perspective on life and optimism, and he's a gift, and he was given the right parents for this. Like, how awesome is that? Right. And me like always trying to find meaning and reasons behind certain things. I think as he was younger, it was like, oh, it's cute, the things he was doing. And I think as I started to get older, I hadn't really thought about my expectations. Like, I'm an athlete. That's what I did my whole life. That was my identity. So playing catch with him, going out to the field, kicking a ball, having conversations with him. I think as he got older, and I just don't think I went there yet with myself. And I think when I started to, the grief built for me was like, well, I may not get that. The cool thing is though, me also having the musician side of me.
And your intelligence.
Thank you, Nikki.
You're very smart.
Thanks, Nick.
You and Jake have shared that.
Love math. So does that. So does Jake. But he's like incredible at the piano. Beautiful voice. Perfect pitch. It's incredible. So
if you didn't know, Jarrod made it to American Idol, was on TV.
Thanks, Nikki.
So, and you probably used to hear Jarrod, if you are part of our Newport Beach crew, I'll go on YouTube. You can see Jarrod on YouTube.
Sorry about the shirtless video.
But the Heartwig Warfare, I played it at our wedding because it was just the best. Anyways,
thanks, honey. Yeah, so that grief started to build. I don't think I've ever had fear of the future. I think that what's happened is, what does this look like for us in the future? Mm. It might be somewhat a selfish comment, but I want to be honest here, is that, you know, we have hopes and dreams and what we want to go do in life and travel and being eventually independent. Somebody to do traveling on our own. Mm-hmm. We love experiences. We haven't really done much because also, you know, he can have needs that, again, sometimes it's hard to understand what he's communicating to. He's obviously gotten extremely better, but like leaving him with parents or in-laws. Like, we just don't know what that's like yet. So that's kind of held us back on things we thought we were going to start doing once we had kids. So I felt a little grief about that too, because that's, that was our whole life before having kids. It's like we would leave the country once or twice a year and travel the world, and we haven't been able to do that. And again, that's might be our own beliefs of what. I'm sure he'd be great. He's a wonderful, easygoing kid. But
there's also elopement.
Yeah, elopement and what that's going to look like, and it gets hard, and so it was the grief of what I thought I would have with my son. And then really, what does this look like for us in the future? Like, how long will he need us? They need us forever, but really, like, can he be independent? Will he be able to get the job and do all the things? I think I've moved a little bit past that now, because like I'm just watching this kid, and it's incredible what he's capable of, and he's blown our minds, which is awesome. But those are the biggest thoughts. And then I have little moments, just like you, where I get frustrated. He can't communicate. I just want to know what he needs.
Well, here's for example. Yeah. We're trying to figure out when to take Jake out of his current therapy and put him into pre-K. And we found an amazing school, amazing support system. And we cannot ask him, are you ready? Do you want to leave?
We don't know how his day goes at school.
We have no idea.
We rely on his therapist to let us know how his day went.
That is so
super hard. You want to have a conversation.
Hard. No, it's like you have to let go. You have to let go of control.
We gotta let go of that expectation. Like, a lot of the expectations. Like, my biggest frustrations are mostly is like, either I'm not having a good day, or I'm frustrated, or I just had an expectation how something would go. It didn't go that way, and then I get frustrated. It has nothing to do with him, but I have those moments of frustration where it's like, dude. And I don't know, like, Sydney's super frustrating just as much, but it's different, right? She's frustrating because she's just talking back and saying, no, don't want to do that, or doesn't get what she wants.
Although Jake is saying no. Yeah, no, I don't want that now.
yeah, maybe learning from his sister.
Yeah.
That really was for me, but I think learning more, and I think I've been more involved with everything more recently, and I think that's really been eye-opening, just to hear how people talk about him and what they see has been really awesome to hear, and obviously see it. But I've been really trying to, be more intentional with him and get to his world, where we were always trying to pull him into our world.
Right.
But I love when I go into his world and his love, like, man, he's so much fun there. Like,
he really is.
Dude, he's engaged, and it's just I have so much fun with him when I'm with him in what he loves to do. And I think that's what you're supposed to do with your kids. Like, follow their interest. And before, it was like, can't talk. I don't know if it's gonna be fun, but I'm like, no, I'm gonna be present and be in his world with him. And I have a freaking blast.
Yeah.
And it's awesome.
It's pure, and
it's pure. Like, the kid I've never met, and I'm probably lost this, but he's the happiest little boy I've ever met in my life. Like, the kid is just giggling, smiling, singing, dancing, just so happy and fulfilled. And when you, like, it's awesome when you're in that with him. And so I have to remind myself, hey, go with him. Where's he at? And he gives you so much back.
He really does. And then when you do that, he feels supported and gets confidence, which then means he then comes into our world too. Yeah. So it's been really, really cool to watch that. I'm curious. You said that more recently you've had a deeper investment, whether it's your time or joining in meetings or autism in any way. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, just like you've always done. You jumped right in and went fully there. And I maybe had a thought in my mind, I know some about it. I was an ABA therapist, which was so long ago. It's so different now, and what that all looks like, and just how the world is seeing autism and new information that's come out. And I think I don't know if it was fear. I just didn't want to go there. But I think now jumping in and learning more and just being more involved and being able to ask the questions. So I have different questions than you do. Right? We're on a call. Like we're different. So we have different lenses and different perspectives and think about things differently. So I can actually get my questions answered and things I'm thinking about and hear from the perspective of others. And I think it's just really helped me understand him better, and what needs he needs and where he's doing great and how I can support him more. So that's really
so would you say that you've found acceptance, which is why you've been able to connect to it?
Yeah, I think I'm in love with the kid. Like I see him now.
Yeah.
Like
same.
I think before
It was autism than Jake.
Yeah, it was
Now
autism and
it's
Jake, and it was
and
also
autism.
like maybe it can get really better and typical.
Yeah.
And I don't want him to be.
Yeah.
I love him.
Yeah.
Because I always say, like, what if he was? He wouldn't be Jake.
No.
And I think that's where I've come now. Like, the kid is awesome.
He is.
And
really,
he teaches me so freaking much every day. Like, if I can live in the way his world, he's having the best time, better than anyone else I know.
Yeah.
So I think, it's that I want him and I love him. I don't want anything different. I want to, whatever he wants and what he wants to do and what he's interested in, I want to help him adapt.
Right.
I want him, the world is not set up right now for him. Mm-hmm. So how can I give him certain skills, not change him, just give him the skills necessary to be able to be fulfilled. And the thing we always talk about, what is confidence, love, and belief in himself. Whatever, and every decision we make now is it going to give him more confidence, help him, yes, believe in himself, but help him adapt. But we know we're clear what that looks like for us. Mm-hmm. And so that's all I'm thinking about. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I'll say one more thing. The other big challenge, I think, is going to friends, things, parties. That still gets hard. The park sometimes gets challenging.
Yeah.
Because he elopes, he runs away.
So, like, for example, neither one of us can take both kids. Jared's done it. I have not taken both kids to the park alone.
I did it more when Sydney could not fully run away.
Exactly. Yeah. Because Jake has had elopement, and if you're not familiar with the term elopement, that means running
just take off
without response to name and stopping.
I'm thinking about
he
safety.
Is not, and no safety awareness. He is not running because he's upset. He's running because it feels good in his body.
He loves to run.
And so imagine if you're taking both your children to the park and one of them runs off and doesn't respond and you have your other child there, like, what do? That is extremely anxiety provoking for me. And so you may have heard in a couple episodes prior about us saving for our backyard. And the why, beyond us just wanting to be in our backyard, the why behind that is so we could have a playground play set in our backyard where we could have both children and we did not have to worry about elopement. Locked in. So these are things that parents of neurotypical children don't need to necessarily think about. Of course, you need to watch your kids, but it's a different experience. Sydney stays right by me.
Yeah, she doesn't go.
So she's not going anywhere. I'm like, Sydney, come here. Yes, Sydney, come here. She comes here. Jake, it's not the same.
And back to the.
Can you come back to the party thing?
Yeah, going to party because he is different.
He is different,
and most of the time he wants to be in his own world.
Yep.
Right, and then also like you always got to have your eye on him.
Always.
And
can't relax.
I mean, and that I don't know if that's also on us. Like, I think one time we were at a party and all the kids were in the basement and kind of left him down there with everybody. He was doing his own thing, but we just don't. You have a worry and fear. What if he opens the door and goes outside? Like, and you just have to think. I think so. You can't really enjoy it.
Yep.
And you're always on guard, always high anxious.
And if he does show autistic characteristics, it's not shame, it's not embarrassment, it is just a awareness, like, hey, our kid is different.
Yeah.
And so that
there might be some subconscious feelings of those things, mm-hmm. like what are people thinking?
Yes, but that's different than like shame.
What are other kids thinking? Are they judging him?
And luckily, like being 4, we're not fully in that place yet, right? Yeah. But it's coming. Yeah. And so
those moments are tough.
Are really tough.
It's hard to enjoy it. It's hard to, as we talked about in the last episode, like making those decisions to go to things. Are we going to enjoy it?
Right.
It does make it a little more challenging with Jake. Like, this is going to be hard. Like, we also know it's important for him.
Right.
But it is really challenging.
2 things I want to come back to is just bookmark this is one, like, is it good for Jake? Just remember that I say that. But the second part is in relationship to what it's like for us in relationships and friends, right? So it is hard.
Yeah.
have relationships with people who do not understand, or they just are in a completely different place. And if you're sitting at the dinner table and they're talking about their children's successes, we went to dinner with a couple, I don't know, a long time ago, and they were talking about how they realized that now that he's 5 or whatever their kid, however his birthday was, is that he wanted his own friends there, and he told his mom that. And I was like, I didn't even think about
What's that like?
What's that like? Or like, you know, this person told them that their child, they saw a teacher hit a kid. Like, they can know these things. I feel really out of the loop sometimes. And I do.
You don't know how to relate.
I don't. I think with Sydney, things will shift a little bit. But
it's still hard.
It's still really hard
to hear those things. You're like, I don't even know what that's like, or when.
And then the second part of this is we've made a lot of effort to make some beautiful relationships with parents with autistic children who we love dearly. And our children are still different.
Yep. But going to dinner is so much different.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can talk about it. They get it. You laugh about it.
Yeah.
The funny things that they do, and you have a conversation, and you feel like you can be yourself.
You feel like you can be yourself. But I just want, if our friends who are listening to this, who have neurotypical children, we love you deeply.
No, this is just real.
But this is just real. Like, this is the reality of our life, is that it's different. And when people try, who have no clue, just like I did, I had no idea what it was like to be a special needs parent. Like, not a clue.
It's like the stuff we used to say. We used to judge parents before we had kids.
Yeah.
And now you're in it. You're like, oh, I got it.
Yeah.
iPad at dinner. Yeah.
Yeah. I understand.
Got you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same thing. You're judging someone.
You have no idea.
You don't have kids. So
you have no idea.
Yeah,
but like the autism thing. So like I've had several people come up to me and be like, oh, did you talk to Bobby Sue? Their child is autistic. You guys would be friends. It's like, maybe. I don't know. Or they'll be like, and it's hard because like you want to be an advocate, but then you don't want to blow up friendships.
You have to understand where they're coming from too. They're trying.
I know.
It's just like when someone loses somebody. No one knows what to say.
Yeah.
You don't know what to say. You're trying. It's always coming from good intent, but it's just as we said, it's hard to understand not going through the experience.
Yeah. So I have a friend who reached out to me when I shared publicly that Jake was on the spectrum, and we have gone back and forth multiple times just talking, and she shared with me that I'm the only person that she knows who has an autistic child and feels extremely isolated and alone. And so I wanted to make a point on this episode tonight that, you know, if you're going through all of these pieces, right, the pre-diagnosis, the diagnosis, the post experience, is that whenever you do feel ready, talking about it with other people who understand is a really powerful piece and a real important healing aspect, because it's supportive for the right people, right? Yeah. Finding the right people, and you don't feel alone. And so if you're curious on how to begin finding those people or building relationships and creating community within the autism community with other moms, like, please reach out to me. I'd love to support you with what I've done, because I feel very lucky in the sense that I have more than a handful of moms that I can connect with.
And there's Facebook groups. There's tons of stuff. So I think one of the last things I do want to talk about is us and our relationship, because you shared this stat with me. I don't know if you remember off the top of your head.
I think it's like 87%.
87%.
It's in the 80s at least.
Parents with a child on the spectrum get divorced. Mm-hmm. That's a freaking high number. It doesn't shock me, because when I was an ABA therapist, I mean, I saw it tear families apart, right? So I think the biggest thing in talking about, okay, obviously we experienced it differently, and I think that's what causes a lot of the challenges. But then us really communicating, the biggest thing was, what do we both want for him? We have to align that we are aligned on what we want for Jake in the future, and right now, but in the future, what's most important to us, and having that conversation and really unpacking that for each of us. And we did come to the same conclusion. Whether how we got there and our different experiences, but as we mentioned a little bit earlier, is that we want him to have confidence in himself, to believe he can do anything, have adaptable skills, and then eventually live a fully fulfilled, independent life.
And know that he's loved for who he is.
The most amount of love ever. Right?
No, but for who he is.
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
And follow his interests. Like we've seen also that because he has this, hyperlexia and this obsession with numbers and letters, a lot of parents try to push their kids away from that because it's like, shouldn't be only playing with those things. But we actually like lean into that as a teaching tool. He's interested. Like if your kid was kicking a soccer ball all the time, you'd let him go play soccer all the time.
Right.
His interest is music, numbers, and letters. So everything in our house is numbers, letters, and music because that's the best way for him to learn and grow. And it's helped a lot. But us having that conversation and really aligning it and having the same values together makes when all these decisions come up, because there's so many decisions that you have to make. Are we doing the right thing? Should we switch them out? What do we do here? What does this next thing look like? All these things, we can always anchor back to our alignment on what we want for him. And this decision, is it leaning towards the things that we want? It's hard because experiencing it differently, I think that's what's hard, because my experience and your experience is different because you are neurodiverse and you had challenges in it where I was raised in a family very differently than you were raised. It's also what we know about autism in our life and what we've been taught and what we've seen. So we're all coming with our own stuff leading up to this. So we have to unpack that. Like, hey, like, what is your feeling about it? How do you think about it? Like, so some parents be like, I don't want anyone to know, or I'm ashamed of it, or no, we can't be.
Or no therapies, nothing. I don't want to do anything.
I don't want to do anything. I don't want to do nothing. Let's just let it play out. We'll see how it goes. So you got to unpack that conversation and find where the alignment is, because you have to be together on this, because this will pull you apart. It's really hard. There's been moments for us where, especially early on, when you were like, there's something going on. I'm like, no, it's all good. Like, that was not helpful. We battled at what we weren't in alignment. So I think that's huge. If you're in a relationship, like, you got to get with your spouse and really get clear on what you both want and find that anchor piece for you both, because it's going to get hard and there will be ups and downs, but having something to anchor to, especially your relationship. And when you're frustrated with your kid, when you're having a bad day, or you're having the grief bubbles, or you're in fear, like, you got to share that, because you have no one else to share it with. Like, especially like that's the person that can relate to you the most and is experiencing it. So you have to be able to have those open conversations, because if you don't, I can understand why that number exists.
Mm-hmm. But even if you do, and you could be met with resistance,
you still have to do it though, because you got to know.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and resentful. And then,
so this is also where we would recommend couples therapy.
Yeah, especially for something like this, especially if you're thinking differently about it.
Like, our therapist actually asked us, have you grieved your perfect child yet? She said that.
Yeah, she asked us that, and that was a great question. But it's really important. This is super important. We've talked about that a lot of times, but specifically for this, because it's still hard.
Well, what makes it challenging, as Jarrod said, like the decisions that he made, the stress, the financial stress, making the right decisions based off your value system, other people's input, social media factor. I mean, there's so many aspects.
Yeah, like who you are as a person is going to reflect what that means when you get that diagnosis, what it means to
you.
I
also do think like the financial aspect is, I mean, I can't remember where it.
I mean, finance is one reason that people get divorced. Add finances plus add a diagnosis, because a lot more money comes from that. It's a double whammy.
Yeah. It's really, really inaccessible for the majority of Americans.
Depending on the needs or the support you want, it could cost a lot of money. Meaning there are government things that the states and stuff give it to you.
But it's not to downplay, because we had government services.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, depending on how specific you want to get and the level of support you want, you could have to pay a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was going to cause a financial burden that you weren't planning for.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right. And kids are expensive as they are.
I think something that would be really interesting to talk about another time would be about raising a neurodiverse and a neurotypical child and the glass child syndrome. So the glass child is specifically related to the child who does not have the autism diagnosis or a, special needs, and what that feels like for them. And something that what we really try to do in our parenting, I think would be really important to talk about, because this is one of the reasons we probably will not have a third child, is because we're able to give attention to both of them equally right now. And
you just don't know. The odds are higher.
Yeah.
That you might have another special needs child.
It's 20. So if you have one autistic child, the probability is 20%.
If it's a boy, it's even higher.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So,
I'm going to debunk that. So that's what the research has said. Yet, autism is so
hot take.
Autism is so widely misdiagnosed, especially in women, because of how autism shows up in women. Girls can highly mask themselves. They tend to be very intelligent. They have strong communication skills. They are communicative. They go missed. Sometimes it's ADHD they diagnose them as, sometimes nothing, anxiety, depression. And so there are so many more adult women in their 30s and 40s who have now become parents, and they have a neurodiverse child, which is then cause them to seek out a diagnosis for themselves. So although at one time this may have been the case, a little boy's disorder, and I call it that because that's what ADHD was. It was not necessarily a female disorder. This has, again, been debunked. But in terms of that, what we have seen, what has been documented, and what people have, tallied, is that there have been more boys than girls. But I don't know if we know, because I could be autistic. We don't know. I have never had an autism diagnosis, but nobody would think that I would be autistic because why? I'm emotionally intelligent. I have strong communication skills. I have relationships with people. Like, I have all the things that you would think is not autism, when necessarily that doesn't mean that you don't have autism. That's one of the last things I want to wrap up with, is that, like, you know best. And I'm saying this to those of you who are listening to this who may have thought about checking something out. Autism, as Jarrod said, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. What we know now about autism is that it displays itself in its own unique way for each individual person. And so what you've seen with Sheldon on Big Bang Theory,
love that show,
or like genius savant, individuals, child prodigies, or if you've seen individuals with severe cognitive impairments, this is what we've been programmed to believe is the spectrum of autism, when reality is it's a whole bunch of things in between. And so I truly encourage the being proactive than reactive, because those years are really important, especially if your hopes and dreams for your child are for them to live a independent life, a thriving, full life, with whatever that means. It's important to support them as early as possible.
And it's about the child.
Last thing I want to say, I'm so sorry.
God.
Last thing I want to say. So if you think of I want to just debunk this. I keep using the word debunk because there's like so many
a lot of things.
You're
I could debunk.
Debunking
A lot tonight.
So high functioning autism versus low functioning autism, which maybe we can go into a little bit more next week. But high functioning autism does not mean that it's a high functioning individual. It means how you perceive that person to be.
It's not their experience.
It's not their experience. So a term that can be used is like looking at what your child needs is like, does my child have low support needs, or do they have high support needs? And in certain areas, they may have more needs than others.
They'll be different per area.
Yes. And so it's just like lean in to the uncomfortable experience of it maybe not being how you thought it would be, because that's what's best for your child.
Preach.
So what do you want to say now?
I was going to say a couple things. I forget where we heard this. I don't know if I heard it from you or I read it. I don't know if I told you, but what's interesting is that we're seeing more and more diagnosis of autism. So, but evolution, right? If it wasn't a trait that was valuable to society and helping society continue to grow, it would slowly dissipate. But we're seeing more. So
but
it's interesting.
You know why, right? You know why we're seeing more?
Tell me why.
We're seeing more because it's becoming much more, we have much more.
I know, but what I'm saying is that trait is actually, there's a lot of people that have probably done amazing things in history and created a lot of things. They thought Einstein was, and I think, and Elon Musk has come out and said he is. These people that have done amazing things are on the spectrum. So that trait is actually adding value to our society.
Mm-hmm.
So we need people on the spectrum. They see the world and perceive the world differently, and their brains work in a way that can actually serve us and serve society to its best. So that's what I also want to say, is that it's not a death sentence. It's not like,
it's definitely not a death
it's
sentence.
not. There's so many great things and opportunities, but the world is telling us differently. So I just wanted to say that because I think I heard that. I was like, oh my God, that's such a great way to look at it.
It is.
Such
I
a
love
beautiful,
that.
beautiful thing to look at. So close this out.
But wait. Yes.
There's more.
No, there's not. It's just to answer this. The reason why we're seeing more diagnoses is not because of vaccines. It's not because of eating all the shit. Like,
she went there.
The reason we are seeing more diagnoses is because we have more diagnostic criteria to tell us more information about individuals who have characteristics that were at one time not considered to be autistic traits.
Got it.
Now we have a lot more information. So people are getting a diagnosis that at one time would have been missed. So more people are getting support. It's truly a beautiful thing. All those other things, we're not going into details about that stuff because that's not important. I'm not going to say it.
Please don't.
But I just want to say that. And, please know as we're closing this out that it took us a long time to get to a point where we were open to talking about this. This is obviously our first time on our podcast talking about it, but we've tried recording this about 4 or 5 times already. I just became open talking about autism more and more over the last year. And so it's a process, and it's okay for it to be a slow process. It's okay. And to feel all of the experience, because that's truly how you move through it, is to feel it. So, we want to answer questions. We want to be there. We don't know everything. No. We know our experience and how we've helped our child. But we're definitely open to talking about this more and answering questions about how we would handle certain things and so forth.
Yeah. So I think biggest takeaways, obviously it was more about our experience, but I think if you are thinking or just have some concerns, I think knowledge is power.
Yes.
Knowing how to support your child more. So don't be in fear of going just to see and getting a diagnosis.
Or not.
You don't know.
But just getting tools, as Jarrod just said.
Not knowing is more, to us, was more fearful.
Yeah.
So I would say getting tools and learning more about your child, whether they are diagnosed or not.
Right.
Huge. Relationship, very important. Knowing that you are both going to experience it very differently based off so many things.
Yep.
So just know that and how important those conversations are. Aligning as a couple of what's most important that you both want for your child, and really go through your experience, right? Because to get to a point where it becomes about the child, you have to get over the fact that you're going to make it about yourself first. It's just human. Like, there's no other way to think about it. Like, even me, like, it was about me first before it became about him. So you need to go through that. So now you can shine the light and attention on your child to give them the needs and everything that they need moving forward. So those would be my biggest takeaways. Anything I missed?
No, I think we did a good job of talking about it. I think the last thing that I would say is that everything changes and nothing changes at all.
Whoa. Deep.
It's true,
it's
right?
True. Yeah.
Everything changes and nothing changes. it takes a while to really sink into all of it. Last words is you're not alone in this.
No.
And to reach out for support.
It does feel lonely.
Yeah, it does.
But when you reach out and just realize how many other people out there are going through the similar experience.
1 in 36.
Which is wild.
So that means 36 other parents are going through this experience.
It means for every 36 parents you meet, one of them is. It means a lot more than 36 people are going through it. It means for every 36 parents you meet, one is going through it.
That's not very many.
It is in the scope of how many parents there are in the world. That means there's
actually,
a lot.
I guess that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah. We got you.
Yeah. Cool.
So stay tuned next week.
Yep.
We'll really get into, because there's so much controversy, and talk about the ABA thing. We'll talk about just our plan and our approach and how we've looked to support Jake and what that looks like, and what Nick knows about all the research that she's done. Plugging her blog. That's her blog.
I'll be also sharing a blog on that next week.
Yeah.
But we'll be talking about all the therapies, how to advocate, how to look for the team,
how to figure out
what to do. And then, I love the question, like, what are your hopes and dreams for your child, and aligning all the things you're doing. So we'll get into that next week. Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope you learned something and you enjoyed it.
Thanks for hanging out. Yeah. Please subscribe. Leave a comment.
Follow us on iTunes.
Follow us on iTunes, on YouTube. Come check us out. We're really enjoying this, and can't wait to have you back.
Yep.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.